Welcome, everyone, to the May 16th City Council work session. Welcome, everyone here and at home. And Councilor Taylor has been asking that we get these committee reports and items of interest up first on the agenda, so that's where they are today. You ready, Betty?
Yes.
You're first.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So, I'll do last. So I'll start with, I want to give you a chance to breathe for a minute.
Okay, thanks.
You.
Go that way.
You. Councilor Zelenka?
Oh, jeez.
Or I could just ask. Are you ready? Yes.
I'm semi-ready. I just left earlier the Human Services Commission meeting this afternoon, and I couldn't get there on time, but I got there for the other part, which is the budget part, and we are looking at kind of holding our own, so to speak, and a lot of discussion around the issues of the homeless and what we are doing and the progress that we're making, and specifically around what we've been doing with homeless veterans. And we've got some more homeless veterans that are coming into the community, as well as dealing with our ever chronic issues around the fact that we don't have housing for people who need housing. And so it's the never-ending battle, and we have continued to keep our commitment to the Human Services Commission fund of about $800,000, and I think that we will be having some more discussion around budget allocations on that score on Wednesday. So
More discussion tonight. That's our agenda.
and some more discussion this evening for our work session.
Betty, you ready?
Sure. I just got this email, which was sent to the mayor and to me, but it's about the increase in stormwater fees. Do we have any choice? I think we don't have, about whether there increases it.
Actually, with an increase in fees, if the council wants to have some sort of a conversation around them, you can. I don't recall the exact process, but the council can weigh in on those, yes.
Well, I think we should have a discussion if it's going to happen. It sounds like a big increase following another big increase. And this person asked me to vote against it, and I thought, do I ever get a chance to vote against it?
What we can do is provide you the information on how it could come to council, and we'll do that for you.
Okay, good. And ARAPA, the good news is that Oak Ridge air quality is improving amazingly and will continue to improve. And that is every time that we are told that we have bad air in Lane County, usually it's from Oak Ridge. And they're still working, the staff are still working on that, and I think it looks hopeful. The other thing from LRAPA is that our discussion of vehicle emissions is now postponed till September. It has been postponed a few times, but if anyone is concerned about that, it would be good to express your opinion. I think the majority of the board of the current board of LRAPA don't think we need any regulation of vehicle emissions. So if citizens think we do, it would be good to express your opinion. And I wanted to thank George Brown for his op-ed, which revealing the costs of the increase in costs for the new City Hall project, which I think was a contribution to transparent government. Thank you.
Councilor Clark?
Thank you, Mayor. I just have a question for the manager. The folks in the Northeast Neighbors have been working for quite some time, many months now, to plan to take advantage of a new ordinance that we passed several months ago with regard to multiple unit developments. And the portion of that we developed and we passed along with the MUPD that a neighborhood association in conjunction working together with the developer could apply for SDC credits for mitigating the impacts of that development. And they've been working this entire neighborhood association has been working quite hard for quite a long time on a neighborhood park that they want to have, that they have agreement with the developer to do. They've actually done quite a lot of planning and would like to apply to us. Now, I know, and it's understandable, that the administrative pieces of that may not be completely together yet and in place for specific procedure, but there's a timing issue involved. And so I have told them it may be to their it may be to their advantage to just apply as they are ready to do so to council, and maybe we'll build this process around that as we do. But perhaps you could give me and in turn them some good advice on how to proceed well.
Is there a specific point of contact we'd be happy to
Yeah, the
contact?
Northeast Neighbors, their president,
Okay.
and their former president.
Okay. What we'll do is we'll contact them and we'll try to figure out the best process for getting that in place, because ultimately, as I recall, those come back to the council
Yes.
anyhow. So
That's correct.
we'll talk to them about a process.
I told
for
them
that.
they may want to just come and, make a presentation in their 3 minutes to council about where they are and give us materials.
Do that anytime.
Yeah, exactly.
Fine, too.
But I wanted to make sure you were in on the loop too, and make sure that your staff has the ability to. I mean, I wouldn't expect you to have all the admin rules done by now, but
Okay. We'll contact them.
we want to work together on that. Thanks.
Chris?
Yeah.
Thank you. First, the governance group for the home funds, which is made up of the two mayors and myself and Councilor Van Gordon from Springfield, met to finalize the approval of the projects that we talked about here and they have talked about in their setting. So those projects have been agreed to. I think they're really great projects, and we talked about them. And I think all of them, both in Eugene and Springfield, look like they're going to be great projects, so I appreciate that. The Human Rights Commission is meeting tomorrow. So I will probably have a report about that later on. I did want to acknowledge the police awards and recognition lunch that was held a couple of weeks ago. It was really a great event in terms of the number of things that our police department is doing that are worthy of recognition and award, including in areas of life-saving and public safety and service, and not only did the sworn officers, but also the staff and the civilians and the volunteers also receive recognition. Also, the dedication to the downtown UVO Center that we provided to the University of Oregon to develop a, I guess you could call it a composite incubator and development system for RAIN and some of the others. That dedication was held last week, and it was just an incredible project, and the building looks great. And to take what was kind of just a not very utilized building near the LCC downtown campus and turn it into the dynamic advanced technology and incubator space that it is now, I think is just a tremendous use of the space, and I think the city deserves a lot of praise for being a partner in that. And then finally, the LCOG executive committee has met to review the budget for LCOG, and once again, I can't tell you how much the organization has turned around in the last 3 years. Brenda Wilson has done a fabulous job, along with her staff, of taking that organization and completely doing a 180-degree turn, and it's really nice to be able to look at a budget where they have been able to create not only a more responsive organization, but a much more fiscally accountable and responsible organization. And so that process is moving right along. Those are the main things that I had.
Thank you. George?
Evidently, Mike and I have been talking to the same people from the Northeast Neighborhood
Get a little
Association.
closer to your mic.
Is that better?
A little bit.
No?
It's on.
Is it on?
Yeah, yes, it is.
Okay.
Mike and I have been talking to the same people from the Northeast Neighborhood Association, and this is a group that's been working with our parks and open space folks to develop the Stryker Park, and they have put in a lot of work, and they've got a lot of citizen support in not only voices saying they want this done, but they've got people lined up with materials, with talent, with equipment. Big pile of dirt out there where they're building the new apartment complex. They've got somebody volunteering to move some of that to help build berms in the new park. So anything we can do to get that thing moving forward, we appreciate it. Just would like to mention, following up on Chris's comments about the EPD awards ceremony, just like to recognize that this is National Law Enforcement Week. And I just personally would like to give a shout out to all the men and women in the law enforcement profession, not only here locally, but across the United States. LTD is continuing its work on the West Eugene route. It's quite a bit of construction going on right now on West 11th. I have been making a number of trips out to Lowe's on West 11th, and fortunately, maybe I'm just lucky, I haven't really been tied up in that much traffic. So it's
further down.
Yeah, it must be further down. And they're also still doing the planning for the 30th Avenue route from Springfield. We have a Lane Workforce Council and Lane Workforce Executive Board meeting this Thursday. We'll be electing new officers on the Lane Workforce Council. I've been serving as the chair of that since Faye Stewart stepped down from the committee. So we'll be electing new officers on that.
Thank you. George Brown?
Thank you, Mayor. Well, I like Councilor Taylor, I think council should have a discussion about the stormwater fee increase so we can get some clarity on that and understand why it's necessary or whether we agree with it. We should have some input. The Mackenzie Watershed Council last Thursday, we finished drafting and final approval of a 10-year work plan. Staff has been working on this for many months, and it's a wonderful document. It follows the new requirements from Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board. There's certain, they want to see a different format for work plans so that it's easier for them to decide who's eligible for grants. And it's really important that they did this. It also is it's a neat document because it contains lots of information about the Mackenzie and the whole watershed, just physical descriptions, the biology, and what the threats are to the watershed and how they propose to mitigate the ones that they can mitigate, and specific areas where they want to work. It's really a wonderful document. The Metropolitan Wastewater Management Commission, on Friday we got a really great news. Their staff has been working for also very many months restructuring the revenue bond repayments, and there was great interest from those financial institutions, and 12 financial institutions were very eager to work with them restructuring these bonds, and some of them are big national institutions, and the work was just outstanding, and the result will save the ratepayers about $15 million over the next 10 years. So it's absolutely fantastic work that they did. That's about it. I was also working on a new set of questions regarding the new city hall. The budgets, where we are in the process. It's unclear to me. Just to seek more clarity of where we're at and more questions about the budget. So I'll be copying everyone on those pretty soon. Thanks.
Alan?
Yeah, Metropolitan Planning Commission, transportation issues. Connect Oregon 6, which is a round of funding at the state level for transportation projects. We forwarded 5 projects. The number one project was an LTD project. It's the Santa Clara Community Transit Center, which is at the old school site, and also the reconfiguration of the one that's right at Beltline there on River Road. And that's a request for $3.5 million of an $8 million project. That was number one. And then number 2 was Eugene Bike Parking in conjunction with LTD in downtown, $112,000 request for out of a $160,000 project. The third one was airport roadway improvements, $550,000 ask for a almost $800,000 project. And then Florence Estuary Project, which is a trail that goes around the estuary that goes west from Old Town around the estuary, was almost $500,000 ask for a $700,000 project. And then finally, the Northwest Container Services, which is a Springfield project where they were asking for $2 million, or $500,000 for a $2 million project for working on that facility there. So those all got forwarded in that order to up to the regional, and then the regional ones get forwarded up to the ODOT. And the other thing of note is the MPC is also the Metropolitan Cable Commission, and the Cable Commission opened the negotiations with Comcast for the new franchise fee agreement, which is a 10-year agreement. It'll take about 2 years or so to get through that analysis and negotiations to get to a new agreement with Comcast. Again, that's for the use of our right-of-way, so the physical use of our right-of-way. Other people like DirecTV don't use our right-of-way and don't have a franchise fee because it's the franchise fee is directly related to the physical use of the right-of-way. And then finally, we got a report, and it was in the paper, about the final segment of the I-5 Beltline interchange is underway, and that's mostly the connections from eastbound Beltline onto I-5 is the big final part of that whole construction project. And that's about it from MPC. And Mayor can talk about the rails.
Good. John, do you have anything you want to mention?
No, ma'am.
Okay, so here's my list of things. I just wanted to take note, we all received notice that Public Works is going through an accreditation process. And over the weekend, I went to see the opening of the Toolbox project, which is a sharing tools project at the Friendly built toolbox shed there on at the Friendly Street Church property. Volunteers and matching grant, they got it going with partially from us from the matching grant program. Really wonderful thing. Very cool. They built it all and have done all that work. Lots of volunteers. It's an incredible thing. You should all go over and see it. Went to Roosevelt Middle School for the kids to interview me on homeless issues. Went to Prairie Mountain School for a morning interview show by their middle school students. And then as Chris talked about, the Olive Street facility, the rain facility, the only thing I would add to that is in the time that rain has been available in our region, 62 businesses have graduated from the 2 accelerators, creating over 100 local jobs. That's very good news. And the other U of O things that are sharing the building are their product design launch lab and the Tyler Invention Greenhouse. So it's a very cool synergistic thing. I did last time, but I also was there, and I want to recognize the event to celebrate 50 years of our incredible symphony in Eugene. And building on what George said here, I want to thank EPD for the really nice recognition they gave me at their ceremony. And then I wanted you to know that I'm got 2 trips coming up, traveling to Victoria to discuss our homeless pilot program. And then I'm heading to Beijing, the White House invitation to discuss Eugene's climate work plan and ordinance with mayors from the United States and mayors from China. So those are 2 things that I am looking forward to doing on behalf of our community. Okay, so that's it for this sharing and items of interest. And the next item up is the housing and homelessness update that we started last time. And I think we're going to just kind of briefly reorient you to it again and then open it up for your discussion and things that you want to dig into a little bit. City Manager?
Thanks, Mayor, and I'll turn it over to Jason. Move over.
Thank you. Jason Dedrick with the City Manager's Office. We have very little in terms of presentation this evening. We just wanted to, at your places, you have a printout of all the slides that we presented last week. We also have up on the screen those slides if we need to go to any of those. There is one additional thing that we wanted to add that we were kind of remiss in not presenting, which was that last week you did pass a motion related to Housing First, and so we just wanted to kind of quickly include a slide to remind you and those at home as to kind of what the principles of a Housing First approach are. And so these are just points that come from the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, just general concepts about Housing First. It's an approach to quickly and successfully connect individuals and families experiencing homelessness to permanent housing. No preconditions or barriers involved, such as sobriety treatment, clean criminal history. And finally, that supportive services are offered to maximize housing stability. And of course, as you noted in your resolution, this does not supersede our ongoing efforts and other programs that we have related to homelessness. It is simply part of the many things that we are now doing as an organization. And so that's it in terms of what we have. So we're here available for questions.
I've got Mike in the queue. Anybody? Right away. Okay, but before I call Mike, I wanted to ask Stephanie, because I think every time we bring up Housing First, we really want to be sure that people know that we already have some Housing First work underway in this community. And would you mind talking about that for a minute?
Certainly. So there are organizations in the community that have been operating permanent supportive housing facilities for quite some time. Currently, Shelter Care, I believe, is operating about 150 units of scattered site Housing First units in the community. And so this is a model that is working, but we need more units based on the number of people experiencing mental illness and substance abuse addictions and experiencing chronic homelessness.
And I guess just for the public's benefit, I'd like to remind people that when we talk about this, we're talking about the housing need we have and the plans we have to try to reach our 600 units in 5 years goal. Is that what it is, Stephanie?
So within the Eugene Springfield Consolidated Plan, there is a goal of creating, acquiring, or preserving 650 units of affordable housing. And that Housing First is one kind of housing that's included in that, but that includes other kinds of affordable housing developments as well. And this was, Council set this goal last year when it adopted the Eugene Springfield Consolidated Plan.
And that there's some, just to let the council know, there are some private discussions underway of trying to move towards building 600 units of housing. There is also a HACSA and Lane County project already kind of moving its way through the planning process for building 60 units of 60 Housing First units, correct? And then let's see if there's anything else that hasn't been mentioned that I should put on the table here. That's plenty. Okay, so just wanted you to know those things were underway and being discussed. Seems like every week now we're working on those things. So, Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. One of the things that I brought up right there at the very end of the last session I wanted to have a chance to talk more about was, frankly, metrics. One of the pieces for this is that we talk regularly about the measurement for homeless on a particular day and extrapolate that as a symptom of where the community is with this issue. We also talk about the many things that we're doing in order to serve folks, but we don't talk about as much from a policy perspective about what we can do to aid folks in the process of transitioning out of that in a way where we're counting the number of people who are no longer in that position anymore. Now, I know we did with the Veterans Housing Program, and I know that one of the things that made that especially successful was that they put a number to how many people they wanted to see in housing, and at the end of the year, when there's still a couple of months out, they knew they weren't quite there, and so that people actually started working a lot harder in order to get to the end of that goal and succeed, and they did it, and then some. It's those kind of metrics that I would like to see us. I mean, I wonder what we can do to start saying, counting the number of people that we're no longer looking for emergency shelter for, or who've transitioned, and have reports and discussions about that as a policy goal. The other piece is, I wonder why we never have discussions here about the things that we may, as a city, be able to do to aid other organizations working on the same problem. For example, the mission. I understand the historic issues around the religious questions involved, but since they're no longer doing that, these are folks serving between 400 to 600 people a night and doing an incredible job with their life transition program and their life change program. And I had a chance to speak with Jack Tripp the other day, and they have plenty of space to be able to triple their size and the capacity to serve it. So I'm wondering why we don't consider that a goal, to aid them with their successful program in some fashion. So there was probably at least 3 or 4 questions in that.
City Manager, would you like to tell him what's underway with the Jack Tripp conversations as much as you can?
Well, and Jack may have mentioned that they are looking at trying to put a 100-unit, essentially, or 90-unit housing first type of development out there on their particular property. What Jack has mentioned is that their property he'd make available, and so he is working with numbers of people to try to actually design probably a public-private partnership, some sort of a housing first unit out there in which they could not only house but also have all the services available.
My question is, what can we do to help them add another 1,000 beds in that space as a city? I know that they're working hard on that, but what can we do? That's my question. And should we have that as a goal?
I guess we're very involved in these efforts. We convened that group, for example, based on Jack's interest in that. So we brought everybody to the table to start having those kinds of conversations.
And I appreciate that. I know you've been working on this particularly hard.
I know the Poverty and Homelessness Board tries to bring all the various entities together. That would also be a good forum to have some input back into that group as well, as the council thinks about how we want to support all these efforts.
Well, my point was really, too, that I'm wondering if we can approach this differently, like they do. Similarly, when their life change program, they talk about what their stages are for people transitioning back into a more, a less traumatic kind of life. And I'd like to see us counting those and dealing with that differently and somehow. I don't know. So I just wondered about your comments on that. I'd like a second round, please, Mayor.
So one piece that I can point to, and this came out in the Human Services Commission annual homeless point in time count, they did provide a statistic of the number of people who were experiencing homelessness who were placed in permanent supportive housing. So on the information sheet, 644 formerly homeless people live in permanent housing designated for homeless people on the night of the count. So, but I think the idea of setting a goal and how many people we want to place is certainly something that we can pursue in our conversations with the county. And so part of their role is they're managing a coordinated wait list. They're also managing the information system that essentially captures who is homeless at different points during the year. And I think there's some possibility that we could work with them to identify some success measures. And we had another conversation actually similar to that today at Human Services Commission, because I think one of the pieces we saw is that you see this sort of overall number of homeless people during the count. What people don't realize is that a lot of those are not the same people. So there's a lot of transition from year to year in terms of who is homeless, and recognizing that people kind of come into homelessness, they're kind of in the waiting room for housing, and then they move out of that, and then additional people become homeless who then are waiting the next year. And so I think what we're trying to do is kind of reduce the number of people that are in the waiting room, so to speak, for housing and services.
So I've
I'll take
got
the second round.
Alan and Chris in the queue, I'd just like to interject in this part of the conversation is that we certainly consider the mission to be an important part of what the offerings in this community, and respect them greatly for the work that they do. But one of the things is they are sort of free of any constraints that government has. Because they can't take any government dollars because they don't adhere to the policies that are, I don't know how to say that right, it's just the federal government. The money that we use, HUD for example, comes with all kinds of rules and constraints, and because they don't take any of that money, they don't have to operate under those rules and constraints. Is that the correct way to say that?
You know, I don't know enough specifics about the mission, but what I can say is that through the 2 RFP processes we do, they are open processes. We try to publicize them widely. We encourage everyone, human service providers, affordable housing providers, to apply if they are interested in utilizing those dollars. So I have many conversations, my staff have many conversations with all kinds of people in the community that are interested in seeking these resources. So I would welcome any conversations or any opportunity to support their interests.
But I just wanted to make clear that I think that one of the, at least to this point, one of the choices they've made is they are an independent organization and therefore can make their own rules and have their own constraints about service and so forth. So that's my understanding of why our dollars could not go into a pool with their dollars.
Yeah. Essentially what happens is the RFPs lay out the requirements, and then applicants have to certify that they are willing to comply with those requirements. And so they have the opportunity and choice to do that if they wish to.
Thank you. Alan.
Yeah, I wanted to point out something that was in our packet from Susan Banning, Executive Director at Shelter Care, where she, a one-pager that talked about the National Alliance to End Homelessness and the study they did about the cost savings of putting people into permanent supportive housing. And one case in particular, there are several here, but Portland, Oregon was one where they looked at the before costs and the after costs, and the before cost and all the costs being how much does it cost to keep them in jail, what's the health care cost, what's the emergency department, what's the behavioral health cost, and what's housing cost, and compared those two things, and what it showed was that the total savings, even after almost a $10,000 investment per person into permanent housing, was a savings of $25,000 and about $50,000 of total costs that we spend on people that are not in permanent housing. So the bottom line of the study is, if you get people into permanent housing, it costs our system a whole lot less to be able to do that. The problem with that is we don't have the capital to create the permanent housing as much as we would like, and it's very, very expensive. And we have, a goal of 600 permanent housing units over a 5-year period, which seems like a drop in the bucket, but it's very expensive to do that, as it is for, and this isn't including a shelter, which we don't have, which would also be expensive, and seems like we're constantly running into a capital constraint on all of our things. And is there a way to promote more capital being used for permanent housing other than, we've got federal incentives, we get the federal monies from home and CDBG and all those things, but is there a way to locally try to maybe give people tax credits or some kind of incentives to be able to create more permanent housing and kind of go around the capital constraint that we continually bump up against? That's a yes/no question.
There are, across the country, local communities have made decisions to self-fund, essentially, affordable housing development. And so there's a number of communities that have created local housing trust funds to augment federal and state resources. And so it's certainly possible. and there's different bonding mechanisms, other financing mechanisms that are all within the realm of possibility for supporting affordable housing. I will say that typically capital is the primary constraint when you are dealing with affordable housing that is serving very low-income people. When you're trying to create permanent supportive housing, housing first units, you also need to think about the service component. So typically those kinds of developments have ongoing operating costs because they need a higher level of staffing on site to support the residents. And then if you're thinking about emergency housing, that's going to be an even higher level of on-site staffing to manage the flow, the daily flow of people in and out of that kind of facility.
Right. Double stumbling block on a shelter. You got the high capital cost to get it going and then a high capital cost to operate it. So when they do housing trust funds, where do they get the seed capital to that? Is that something that they save up to do, or is it something to get some kind of seed money or a windfall and then start a trust?
There's a really incredibly wide range of ways and mechanisms. There's actually an organization called the National Housing Trust Fund Project that catalogs all of the different ways in which states and local jurisdictions have created these kinds of resources. I'd be happy to pull together some summary information
That would be
and
very
provide
good.
that.
Yeah, and the other one, of course, we could do a bond. That would mean a local bond that would be for affordable housing, and that would go out to the voters for a vote. We, as far as I know, we've never done that in our local community, have we?
Not to my knowledge.
Yeah, that would take a pretty substantial effort, but it would create a substantial amount of money potentially. And if we did that, what would and it would be the proceeds from the rent that would pay off the bond debt service? Is that the way those things work?
I imagine so, but I'd have to do some research to tell you that.
Back to us on those two things. Those are interesting to me. Thank you.
Chris?
Thank you. This whole issue has so many moving parts, not only in terms of the solutions that we're talking about and how they interconnect, but also the audiences that we're talking about, the users, if you will, and which solution is the best fit for the type of user and what partnerships need to come together to provide that. And I think everybody is really recognizing the value of each part of that conversation. And so I really have to spend a lot of time trying to figure out how does this fit into the holistic picture. What ultimately are we trying to achieve? And one of the things I like about the Housing First model is it gets away from people living in tents who can have their stuff stolen. Getting away from the shelter as the minimal level of resource. And I'm adamant that we don't want Housing First to replace shelter options. We need them both. There is a continuum. We need to make sure we provide shelter options, and thinking about what the mission might be able to do as a shelter option as opposed to the city being able to do, I think is one of those complicated parts where we have to look for the right kind of partnership. For many years, the mission either couldn't or wouldn't take public money. And now I think we're in a new era where they're beginning to look at what that might look like. And so we're exploring what a potential partnership might be. But I think it doesn't remove the responsibility for the city to have some role in the sheltering area, just as you don't want to remove the private. And so it's what's the best balance that works best. And I know that we're working on that, so I'm confident we will get there. But to the notion of Housing First, that's a great option for people who want to get back into housing, start to get stabilized, and try to find their lives again. And that's what most people think of homeless folks as being, as somebody who wants to get off the street, wants to be able to get back and get back reintegrated into society. And I think a large percentage of the homeless population is that. But there's also a large segment of the homeless population that through mental illness or drug addiction or alcoholism or any other number of other conditions are frankly not going to get a job, and they're not going to reintegrate all that easily back into society. Some may, but a large percentage are not. They should be in mental institutions, but the state chose to close those down. And so they're now on the streets of Eugene. I don't want them to just hang around on the streets of Eugene. I would like to get them into some sort of a housing option, but I'm not doing it with the intention of thinking that they're somehow going to live there temporarily and then go off and find great jobs and live wonderful lives. So what we have to wrap our head around is the fact that for some people, we're doing all of this just to help them stabilize their lives, and that is actually an okay thing to do. That this is not a group that deserves or should be just left to lay on the street.
Thank you. Greg?
Thanks, Mayor. One of the things that came up at the HSC meeting today that I noted was the issue of property management companies and landlords that are being more resistant to renting to, the homeless, and some of the barriers that are created as a result of some of that resistance that are there. Do you see that as a continuing growing trend among property management companies and landlords? And if so, and I know that some of that is already there as a base, but what we can do in terms of providing services for those people who are unhoused, who may have mental or substance abuse issues that become barriers, or rental histories that are inconsistent or spotty, that we can work with property management companies and landlords to remove some of those barriers, because my assumption is that is also continuing to constrain the amount of available units that are out there for people to be able to access and to rent.
I think that landlord outreach is definitely a strategy that's being utilized. It was utilized significantly through the Veterans Housing Initiative, and the Human Services Commission recently received additional state funding, and they are using part of that to do some outreach to landlords. I think the other piece of it is also creating more units where folks can be placed. And so that's kind of the other piece, is recognizing that the affordable housing stock creates a pool of units that are available and can be utilized in these situations as well.
Well, besides the outreach, is there other ways to incentivize private landlords to be able to feel more comfortable, have a level of comfortability around renting to this population?
Some other strategies that are being utilized, one is a master lease, where essentially the nonprofit holds the lease and guarantees payment to the property owner, and then they manage the lease with residents. Another strategy is creating a deposit pool, and so that they can receive that. And then another strategy that actually Ann Williams from St. Vincent de Paul mentioned today during our PHB meeting was a landlord helpline that they could call for assistance. And I don't know, Jason, if you want to add anything.
Yeah, just that with the smaller population related to vets on Operation 365, we found some success with what were, I guess, psychological barriers for property managers around what it might be like to offer units for this type of use. And so the idea of a 24-hour helpline where they can call if an issue comes up, and it may be an issue they've never dealt with before as a property manager. The idea of, and this would kind of goes with the pool of funds that might be available for any damages that may occur during the period that folks are there. So those are a couple of things that we learned in working with other cities that helped to bring property managers around on this type of housing. So I think, we explored those with the smaller population related to vets, and as with a lot of things on that project, it's about what can we do to scale those up. And so I think those added to the ones that Stephanie mentioned are all good ways that we can help kind of bridge that gap.
And where are those funds housed in the county budget? Specifically, because if I look in here, there has to be a place somewhere where those funds are being housed at, or what line item is that
So
in?
the source of it is the emergency housing account and supportive housing assistance program. And so
There's a subline there.
yeah,
Okay.
and so there's some additional information on that Steve Manila has presented at a couple of different meetings. I think he presented it at the Poverty and Homelessness Board meeting, the last meeting as well. So there is some additional information there. The one other strategy I was going to mention is that sometimes the units are not physically set up for people with disabilities, and so one of the things the city funds through CDBG is accessibility improvements in rental units, and so because sometimes a landlord doesn't feel like a unit is suitable for a person with a certain set of needs. So that's another way in which we can assist private landlords into helping them accept folks that may have particular needs.
Yep.
So I would just add to that from the meeting this afternoon, what I heard is some of those funds are going to pay for some navigators to help people navigate the system so they can figure out how to get into housing. And in the mitigation fund. And then I heard, I believe it was St. Vinny's had their day number 1 of the helpline is today. So that's up and running, right? So those are a few of they're on it. And the money that they have received is specifically for working with landlords and trying to make that function better. So it's a high priority that the county is really focusing on right now. So, yeah. Mike.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to follow up and say the reason I ask so many questions around metrics isn't for the sake of feeling better or having some less useful comparison. The reason I think it's important for us to have really deep and effective metrics around people that are getting well, people that are transitioning back into normal society. I use the word normal in quotations because of my lack of a better word to use that way. It is because I would like a tool for us to be measuring effective policy choices. I want to know, I want better metrics so we can say a lot more people are getting well, a lot more people are transitioning into more healthy living situations, and that's based on the kind of policy choices we're making. I don't want to every year come back and look for HRC I'm having a moment here, sorry. Yeah, Human Services, thank you. To ask us for larger and larger budget allocations, what I'm looking for is let's make smarter policy choices because the metrics tell us we're doing the right thing or the wrong thing. Number 2, to take off on what the mayor was mentioning, I agree. I don't mean what can the city do to help channel operational dollars to the mission. That wasn't really what I was getting at, and I wasn't very clear about that. What I meant was what can we be doing to help them from a capital perspective to build a facility that can house another 1,000 people. I mean, I know it's too far out west for us to have any kind of conversation about the border for the downtown urban renewal district, for example, where we might be able to have some manner of tool to help them build such a facility on the land they already have access to. But are there other tools that we might put into play in order to help them have appropriate facilities? Because my understanding is the community wants to step up to help them operationally. So I would like us to see them have greater capacity and ask what can the city do to help that. And then lastly, I would say that the chair of the Poverty and Homeless Commission and I have had a lot of conversations lately, and one of them, he talks about a different kind of framework within which we talk about this, and I agree with it, that we're a community of wellness. If you look all around, we run, we eat healthy food, we grow things, that should permeate this conversation as well. That we should be saying for folks that want to get help well, whether it's addiction or otherwise, we ought to work better with the county for mental health capacity. But we ought to be saying, if you want to get well, we want to help. And I think that would help us with the other piece that's more around enforcement that we're unable to do well, because we can say if you don't want to get well, it's probably not okay to sleep in a park or by the river. That's not okay. But if you want to get well, we want to help. So I would wonder about your thoughts on the approach difference that way.
I would say a couple things. I do like the framework of wellness. I know they use that at the mission, and others are using that. One place where this conversation could continue is when we talk about community justice, and that's a part of a conversation that really intersects our public safety system with the social service network as well. And so this conversation also would be really appropriate in that place around what is the role that we choose as a city organization to play in that broader conversation. And then as the council thinks about how they want to frame it and what are the policy choices, and then I think where do we want to actually support with resources in that broader community justice system, much of which really is around homelessness and other things. So that's also a good place to have this conversation.
Thank you.
Certainly support the idea always of wellness and working toward that, but I think the part that I get this little pinch in this conversation is I just want to be sure that we all understand that the Housing First model is specifically premised on the fact that you don't have to have made a decision to get well in order to have access to that program. That program is to get you into a housing situation where you can stabilize and make better choices for yourself. So there's sort of a fine line there about creating opportunity for people to do better, but not making that be the criteria upon which they can get service. So that's one issue. And I did want to say that if you haven't looked at the Poverty and Homeless Board strategic plan, you should, because it really lays it all out that everybody in all the jurisdictions have been talking about, and it's going to go before the Board of County Commissioners on June 21st. So then you'll know, that'll give you a lot of clarity about the direction that we're all saying we want to go as a community. And then the other thing is the county, as I understand it, is really emphasizing behavioral health. And so probably the next group that they're going to really hone in on, like we did on the vets, is people with behavioral health issues and focus hard on that. And they are, at least at this point, the county is the one that keeps the information on who's being served, how many people are being served, which people we've moved. They're the ones keeping all, and they're doing a really good job of keeping all of that information. And if you'd like more about the metrics, I think they'd be more than willing to share that with you, because that should be driving some of our discussions, paying attention to the metrics that they were already gathering. This is an effort right now for us to move from silos to how do we all work together to move the dial for the whole community. And so difficult piece for us is to figure out which pieces we decide that are good ones for us. And I think that's why the manager's pointing to what a big difference we could make if we really paid attention to this community court issue and the off-ramps and the giving access to services instead of using the jail beds and things of that sort. So that's a real opportunity in front of us to decriminalize, so to speak, and to give people more opportunities and steer them in the right direction and hopefully save resources at the same time. Councilor Pryor.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because one of the real takeaways for me from the conference I attended in Chicago on community justice was the fact that you can take advantage of a court system to create the mechanism which just plain old on the ground gets people into the kind of assistance that is really going to be beneficial to them. I remember for the short time that I worked in alcoholism counseling, one of the toughest things to do was to get an alcoholic to admit they needed help. I mean, there's an awful lot of people who need help who don't think they need help, and therefore they're not going to voluntarily make the choice to get into a human service or a supportive system because they don't think they need it or they don't want it. So sometimes a system like community justice, rather than taking somebody who's created an infraction And it's not even an 80-20. It's more like a 90-10 kind of problem, where when we see the real problems with folks on the street, it's 10% of the population of homeless people. 90% are people who really need good supportive services, and they're not going to create a lot of problems. But for the 10% that do, you need a system that's more structured and more specific to try to get that help even when they don't think they need it. And what the justice system can do, which I learned, is if somebody is cited for an infraction and goes before that court, rather than sentencing them to jail, which is, even the justice system recognizes that doesn't work anymore, is to say, I sentence you to go into this next room, and I sentence you to get help from these people that are waiting here to help you. And so it kind of takes not entirely takes the volunteerism out of it, but it does create a system where for people who really need help, don't recognize they need help, but could benefit from that help, it can be there. And not as a jail solution, but as an actual assistance solution. Eugene is already experimenting with a mental health court that meets every week. And one of the beauties of that system is people who are in need of mental health services are sentenced by the court to take their medications and see their therapist. So it's not an onerous obligation that the court's imposed on them. It's take your medication and see your therapist, and then come back next week and show me that you've taken your medication and talk to your therapist. And so the outcomes improve dramatically. And it's not a jail outcome, it's not an incarceration outcome, but it does improve the lives of people who, if they take their medication and receive counseling, can do a whole lot better with their lives. And that just shows what you do in mental health court. There's veterans courts, there's families courts, there's justice, there's all poverty courts, there's all kinds of courts that can follow this same model to produce much better outcomes than taking people, putting them in jail, teaching them to be better criminals, and then releasing them back onto the streets again. So I think this is part of that conversation, and I'm glad it came up, because I think exploring this could be very helpful for that on-the-ground practical aspect of dealing with homelessness.
I also wanted to take note of the county is, and Pearl's in the audience, she can help me if I need this. They are having 3 behavioral health specialists in the jail, work in the jail system now. The county is correct, and a public outreach officer as well in the jail. So those are all big steps forward from where we've been, and I think that's really good. And then I was asked to remind you a couple things as you think about all of this. One is what Stephanie has said before about taking care of what we have while we're talking about building more. So you have Yapoa over here, which houses how many low-income people?
It's over 220 units.
220. That's been around for what, 50?
Almost 48 years.
48 years, and is in need of help right now. And that's a substantial building. It will take a substantial effort to work with it, but it's an important piece of serving the very people that you might find homeless if they don't have a place like that to live in. And then we always we talk about Cahoots, but I want to remind you about Buckley House, and I don't know what do you even know what their situation is right now? I think we ought to check into that as we they always seem to be on the cusp here. So as you look at our dollars, I think we better pay attention to Buckley House as well. So just wanted to remind you of those things. Anything else?
Mayor, can I add a couple comments about
Sure.
the health perspective? And so health and housing there's a growing body of literature that really supports all of the interconnections between health and housing. And so you think about housing affordability, the stress that places on families and contributes to mental health issues, quality issues. And we've started working with the county several years ago through the Lane Livability Consortium, which really focused on exploring the interconnections around health, housing, economic development, and transportation. There was a lot of growth that occurred in our community in terms of understanding how to work across those different issue areas as a result of the Lane Livability Consortium. One outgrowth of that is that we actually did a health impact assessment of our consolidated plan and to really look at how our housing investments impacting health. And the result was that we are overwhelmingly focusing on kind of the whole spectrum of health issues within the consolidated plan. There's continuing conversations. The county, Trillium, and United Way just completed the community health assessment, and through that process, they have identified the social determinants of health, including housing, as a critical piece that they want to focus on. And they're now engaging in their community health improvement plan. And I've had conversations with Lane County Public Health staff, I'm sure others at the city have as well, about how we could work together. Another piece of this is at the statewide level, we are getting a Medicaid waiver. And so part of this is how can you use Medicaid funding to help support housing activities in recognition of the tremendous health impacts that simply providing safe, decent, affordable housing can provide to a family.
And today, when we also talked about, and I think this is important for you to think about too, is city's piece a lot is affordable housing. That's part of what we do. And there are all kinds of barriers to building the housing that people actually have in the queue, and you can't move fast enough. So there's even if we planned more affordable housing projects now, they have to get in the queue behind things that are already waiting. And as I listened today, it seems like there's a considerable number of potential housing projects that are in the queue waiting. They have to get things like the tax.
Yes. The low-income housing tax credits and these are distributed by the state through a competitive process. This is the primary vehicle for creating new affordable housing in our community. That said, the state is exploring other mechanisms. In my presentation last week, I mentioned the $60 million in bond financing, and that is going to create another stream of funding to support smaller projects. And so there's going to be conversations over the summer about how we might utilize those types of resources and create project proposals. Again, the money will be distributed competitively, but I think there are some opportunities there that we haven't had before.
Maybe one of the things that this body has the ability to do is to, along with our partners, to look at barriers and see if we can get some of those out of the way, and to look at opportunities and see if we can truly take advantage of those. That could be how we keep our eye legislatively and how we keep our eye on the things that are available and make sure we get up at the front of the line, as opposed to finding out that it's happened after it's already been taken by somebody up the road here. So I think those are things that could make a big difference for us if we figure out how to maximize the use of what's out there and try to move things through faster, because it kind of makes you it's hard for the public to understand that the possibility of building hundreds and hundreds of more housing units really depends on how the pipeline works. And we have a part in that pipeline. So that's just something for you to think about. Okay. Anybody else? George, did you need anything more from this conversation? Okay. All right. Thank you all.